still searching for the boy?
What do they want with him? We can't go through the front door. There's gotta be another way in.
Episode 4 of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon just came out a little bit early on AMC Plus, and I just watched it, and in this video I'm going to give you my first impressions, my first overall reaction to it. But I'm going to let you know right now, this video isn't going to be as in-depth as some of my previous Daryl videos because there wasn't a lot of takeaways for me personally in this episode, at least not a lot of big narrative takeaways, but that's not to say that I disliked this episode or I thought this episode was weak. I actually really loved this episode. It was just all about a lot more smaller, cool little details that I enjoyed. So we're going to talk about it, but before we do, consider subscribing. I talk about the Walking Dead universe all the time on this page. I talk about every single episode of the Walking Dead universe as it airs, but I also talk about other TV shows. I do trailer reactions, I talk about movies, and I talk about survival horror gaming as well. So just consider subscribing if any of that seems interesting to you. So this is an episode of Daryl that I feel like we desperately needed, and I was really hoping for in either episode 3 or 4. An episode where it wasn't huge on the narrative, it wasn't huge on the world building, but it was huge on just the pacing and the action in the smaller moments. It's episodes like this that are gonna make this season that much better when you binge watch through it when it's over. And again, there were some huge narrative moments, some huge implications for the overall universe. Like, for example, in the very beginning of the episode, Laurent, I believe his name is, the little child prophet, he folded his hands and he prayed, and the walkers avoided him. Don't know what that's about, not sure how I feel about it. I'm sure there's some sort of explanation. He's probably gonna have like walker DNA within his body since he was technically born from a walker. If that's what happens, not sure how I'm gonna feel about it. But like I mentioned earlier, and I'm gonna say again here, there were just so many small moments in this episode that are just memorable to me, and I really appreciate it. The scene where Daryl re-meets the pigeon guy and he tries to rescue him, but then that guy leaves hiding to try and save his pigeons, and then he's murdered, and then Daryl kills the two guys. However, I thought it was kind of hilarious that when that guy died, Daryl had a knife that he could have used to, you know, peacefully put him down before he reanimated into a walker, but instead he chooses to use his flail Morningstar thing. Like, hilarious and completely brutal for no reason. And then there was a scene at the Eiffel Tower, which I really liked. I love seeing historical landmarks in the Walking Dead universe. I'm so excited to see what they're going to do with them, and just the sound effect of this giant structure and how it's creaking and swaying in the wind and it sounds like it could fall at any moment. That sound effect alone was almost as horrifying as all the walkers around it. And we got a Daryl torture interrogation scene. I always love those scenes, and it's been a long time since we got one. However, it is a bit unrealistic and unbelievable that Daryl stabbed that guy 4, 5, maybe 6 times, and then afterwards he was walking around with relative ease. We get a fight scene with Daryl and Quinn on a balcony. It reminded me of Batman versus Bane. Not that the fight scene was that badass or that impactful or that adrenaline inducing, but just the setup and the way it was directed kind of reminded me of that. And then we get a really cool mini battle in the catacombs that involved a lot of grenades and a lot of Molotovs, and I liked that as well. So I feel like this episode, when standing on its own, within its own merits, might be the weakest out of the 4 so far, but again, it's one of those episodes that you need to break up the pacing to fill up this season, to make it that much more entertaining when you watch through it all. But again, everything positive that I've said about The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon so far also stands for this episode. Great direction, great dialogue, great pacing, and just overall, The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon is a very high quality Walking Dead product, especially in modern Walking Dead years. But there's my very brief and very quick thoughts on the newest episode of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon. Again, I apologize that the video is not as in-depth. I don't have that many thoughts, but I did enjoy this episode. But I want to know what your thoughts were. What were your biggest takeaways from this episode? What did you like? What did you dislike? Let me know in the comments. And once again, consider subscribing, and thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far.